So we started off this level looking at measuring economic growth in terms of real GDP per capita. So economic growth is the change in real GDP per capita. So we've been talking about how we find real GDP, how do we measure inflation. But let's go back now to calculating the change in real GDP per capita. So where do these numbers come from that we saw in the early slides? Well, when we calculate economic growth, calculating the economic growth rate is very much the same like calculating inflation. You're looking at the change over time. So just like when we calculate the inflation rate, the economic growth rate is really new minus old divided by old times 100. In this case, the new and old are real GDP per capita. So we need to be able to find real GDP per capita for 2 years, and then we can look at the new one versus the old one to find economic growth. So for example, if we look at 2017, in 2017 the real GDP was $2 trillion. The population of Canada just over 36 million. So we can find real GDP per capita by taking that 2 trillion, 2017458 and 6 zeros, and dividing it by the population at 36,109,487. And that will give us the real GDP per capita. So in fact, if we just type that into a calculator, 2017458 and 6 zeros, and divide that by 36,109,487, we end up with $55,871. $55,870.58 actually. Now, we can find the real GDP per capita for 2016. We do the exact same thing. We take real GDP. In this case, it's 1.9 trillion, so 1958056 and 6 zeros. And divide by the population at the time, which was 35.7 million, so 35702,908. And if we throw all that into a calculator, we get 1958056 and 6 zeros divided by 35702,908. And you got to put the right numbers into your calculator, or else you've got problems. So we end up with $54,843. Assuming I typed that on correctly into my calculator. So you're going to have to double check me. Now, once we know the real GDP per capita for 2 years, then to find the economic growth rate, we're simply doing new minus old divided by old. So in this case, it would be 55,871 minus 54,843 divided by 54,843 times 100. Okay, so 55,871 minus 54,843, so new minus old, divided by old, which is the 54,843, times 100, and we get a growth rate of 1.87%. So from 2016 to 2017, the economy grew 1.87%. To give you a little bit of a comparison, we can see in the 2008 recession, 2008, 2009, you can see here that contracting economic growth was negative. Okay, we can see that because of oil prices falling in 14-15, we also see a contraction there as well. We had our own little mini recession. So it looks like for 16-17, we're growing at about 1.87%. We're producing more goods and services per person. All right, well, what about 2017 to 2018? Same type of calculation. We got to take our real GDP, divide it by the population, and then look at how it changes between the 2 years. So give that calculation a try and see if you can't figure out how much the economy is growing. If we want to look at growth over time, you can see here economic growth back to 1981. And again, these negative economic growth periods here are recessions that we've gone through. Now, if we know what our growth rate is, then we can use what is called the rule of 70. The rule of 70 is a way to estimate how long it will take something to double in value. So we can use the rule of 70 to figure out how long anything will double in value. You can use it for your investments. So let's suppose you have $1,000 in your savings account. How long will it take for that savings account to double in value from $1,000 to $2,000 if your current interest rate is 5% per year? Well, we can find that using the rule of 70 by taking 70 and dividing it by that 5%. But instead of using a percentage, we just take the number. So if it's 5%, we take 70 divided by 5. And 70 divided by 5 is 14. It'll take 14 years for that $1,000 to double in value. We can use this rule of 70 to figure out how long it will take our population to double in size, for our economy, our GDP, to double in size. So for example, if we go back on our slides, so go back 2 slides, we found that from 2016 to 2017, the economy was growing at 1.87%. So according to the rule of 70, we can take 70 divided by 1.87, and that will tell us that if we continue to grow at the rate of 1.87, how long before our economy goes from $2 trillion in size to double that to $4 trillion. So we take 70, we divide by 1.87, and we find that it will take 37.4 years for our economy to go from 2 trillion to 4 trillion. And you can use this rule of 70. It's just a quick way to do math. The rule of 70 was actually created by economists back before calculators, so that we could just quickly do a calculation in our head. There are other rules, rule of 72, rule of 74, that are used in other disciplines. This one just happens to be the one that was used historically in economics. They all kind of get you very similar numbers, but it's just a general rule of thumb to help us quickly do a calculation in our head. So if our economy grows at 2%, 70 divided by 2, 35 years for it to double in size. If our population is growing at 1%, 70 divided by 1, it'll take 70 years to get it to double in size. So you can do quick calculations. So here we found that at the 2016-17 growth rate, it'll take 37 years to double. What about 2017 to 2018? You calculated the economic growth rate for that year. How long would it take for the economy to double in size at that continual rate?